For anyone who just stumbled upon Hellish Quart and sees it for the first time. Hellish Quart is a fighting game about one-on-one sword dueling, in which the blades block each other using physics, and the characters use motion-captured historical fencing techniques. Players fight as 17th century warriors, Cossacks, Hussars, Janissaries, Highlanders, Tatars, and use sabers, rapiers, broadswords, longswords, and many other blades. The game is a love letter to ever more popular historical European martial arts, also known as HEMA. Hellish Quart is an indie game created by a team of just 2 developers and is now released on Steam Early Access and GOG.com. Hellish Quart is a spiritual successor to games like Bushido Blade or Kengo, but with an European twist. The main feature of the game is that the swords actually physically clash and block each other, using the game's engine's physics simulation. There are no visible health bars and, like in the aforementioned games, fighters can be killed by a single well-timed and measured attack. The main goal of creating Hellish Quart is to get closer to realistic fencing. There are no pirouettes, saltos, magic attacks, etc. We are aiming for the gameplay and animations that look and feel like a real HEMA duel, which you can see on YouTube. We use historical fencing treatises to design the moves, but also we try to capture the chaos and human nature of the fencers, because as we know, actual real-life tournament fights in any martial arts are far from a textbook form examples. So what can you do in the game? How do you control it? You control your fighters with a D-pad or a thumbstick and 5 buttons. 4 of those buttons represent attacks from 4 angles: high right, high left, low right, low left. Holding the 5th button changes the guard position. The controls are very similar to games like Tekken, UFC or early Mortal Kombat games. You can walk in any direction and freely sidestep. The directions you input modify the attacks. So for example, pressing forward plus any attack will result in attacking forward animation, and pressing right plus any attack will result in sidestep attack animation. The goal of the duel is to wound your opponent to the point when he is unable to fight any longer. So for example, a cut of hand will end the fight, but a shallow flesh wound will not. On top of those multi-directional cutting attacks, you also can change stances by holding a left trigger or spacebar. This will allow assuming various new stances depending on the weapon and will allow to execute yet another set of different attacks. A special stance will also allow to bind your weapon to opponent's weapon and keep the contact between blades, which greatly helps with blocking thrusts. And yet on top of all this, you can do a classic special move, for example by pressing down forward attack or other combinations. The most important feature of Hellish Quart's combat system is the auto block. If you don't press any attack, the character will automatically assume correct guard position against an incoming attack. All characters are constantly guarding by default, unless they attack. Guarding doesn't mean that you are invincible when you do it, like in the other fighting games. Guarding just puts your sword on the path of the incoming attack, and the sword blocks the opponent's blade with a physical collision. Every body part has its own health. For example, a hit in the head will almost always end the fight, while hit in the left shoulder, that is the one that doesn't hold a sword, will likely not wound your opponent enough to end the duel. The fights in Hellish Quart can be long if both fighters are very careful and care about defense, but usually they are quite short and end horribly. We try to replicate the look and feel of a HEMA duel in Hellish Quart. The animations are recorded by HEMA practitioners using motion capture, and yes, we have the afterblow. Even if you hit your opponent first, he still can get you with his last dying attack. The main mode of the game will be a story campaign written by the best-selling Polish historical fiction writer Jacek Komuda. The campaign will feature full 3D cutscenes, examples of which you can see in Hellish Quart's trailers. At this stage of early access, the story is not yet done. It will be added later on, because first we need to make playable versions of all characters that will star in the story. So what modes are playable right now? We have the classic quick fight, both players versus CPU or player versus player. We also have a survival mode, where you fight a streak of random opponents with your chosen character and try to last as many duels as you can and break your previous record. There's also the history buff mode, where everything is random, your fighters and your opponents. Each time you win, you are rewarded with one fun history fact. This mode is perfect for a one more round syndrome relaxing session. All those modes can be played with sharp or wooden training weapons. Wooden weapons are also used in the training mode, where successful hits don't end the fight. Aim of this mode is simulating a HEMA sparring. At the moment we are also adding modern synthetic sword simulators and all kinds of modern HEMA clothes and protectors as customization items for the characters. This way, if you want, you can turn the game visually into a real HEMA simulator. Another interesting mode is the Right of Way mode. Right of Way, also known as Fencing Priority, is a 19th or even 18th century rule set that allows to score double hits. In plain words, if both fencers hit each other at the same time, the point goes to the one who started his attack first. In other words, the one who took the initiative. This rule is to teach fencers that defending your life is more important than hitting the opponent. If you see that your opponent started his attack, you should not go for a double kill. You should block or avoid his attack first. Or hit him first, but without being hit yourself. Right of Way mode doesn't change the mechanics of the duel, just the scoring of double kills, but yet it dramatically changes the way people fight. This mode is of course entirely optional. At this moment we use Steam Remote Play Together or Parsec to play online. With Steam you press Shift plus Tab in the game to show the options. Then click Invite anyone to the game or pick your Steam friend from the list and click Invite to Remote Play. You can also copy a link for your game session and give it to anyone to join. The other person doesn't need to have the game, so you don't need to convince your friends to buy it. You can just play with anyone. I will now explain why we don't have a classic native online at this moment. In traditional animation-based fighting games, there are two separate games running. One is the server and one is the client. Every few moments the games exchange a packet of input information. If they desynchronize at any point, games stop, rewind to the moment where everything was in sync, apply input and fast forward the animations with correct input applied. All this in a single frame. Hellish Quart, however, is a physics simulation that runs on a native Unity physics system. It simulates frame by frame and can't be rewound and corrected like that. And even if it could be, there is no point, because it is non-deterministic. That means every time the simulation gives a tiny bit different result. That may mean I hit or I missed by 1 mm. This causes server and client desync very quickly and irreversibly. For now, please play online with Remote Play Together or Parsec. It works right now and it works well, and the other person doesn't even have to own Steam or the game. I realize it needs at least 5 megabits per second connection and it doesn't have ranks, etc., so it isn't a solution for everyone. But if you meet the requirements, you are literally 2 clicks away from playing online, even with your friends who don't buy games. I know a bit about game design, animation, and I love HEMA, but I lack knowledge of the netcode. We need to finish making the game as it works now, hand the complete game to some expert online making company so they can figure out and try to implement native online somehow, and if it doesn't cost an unreasonable amount of money, try to do it. I don't promise it can be done though. Physics-based games are usually local, for those reasons I explained. Now, the original prediction of going out of early access and finishing the development of the game was 1 to 2 years. This was a good prediction for minimum viable product I had in mind then, but at this point the scope is larger than initially planned. This means you'll get more stuff, but reaching the end of the development and updates will take longer. In the beginning there were supposed to be 12 characters, a story mode, arcade mode, and a single fight mode. However, the game turned out more popular than I ever expected, so we increased the scope to 24 planned characters. Also, some of the fencers ended up having 2 stances, which increases the numbers of animations by 2. Next, high guard and low guard were added, which also adds new attacks from those stances. Some fencers can do them from both stances, so again, animations times 2. This is not only adding more characters than planned, but also they are way more complex. Additional mechanics were added: binding, wounding through steel, bashing weak part of the blade, wounded wind animations, customization, thrust body penetration, more gameplay modes as well as right-of-way rule mechanics, which even in normal fights will greatly help with AI. Key characters are planned to have individual short stories, not as cinematic as the main story, but still. Training weapons and HEMA gear were added too. Non-lethal tap-tap sparring death animations for all body parts. Offhand weapons are planned, which require even more functionality. Tons of initially unplanned experiments, content and features, and more are coming. With this greatly increased scope, the development will naturally last longer. We are having a blast experimenting and developing new things for Hellish Quart. The scope grows, but this doesn't mean we work slower. You get more stuff at the same pace, so it lasts longer. I update fairly regularly, please see the updates list on the Steam page. So what are the plans for the first half of 2022? We have 2 immediate goals: creating the classic arcade mode and the first short story for Jacek. For the arcade mode, we are going to need the game boss. The boss, like in many other fighting games, is a part of the story mode, but we will present him in the upcoming classic arcade mode first, while the main story will explain his existence and the background. The first short story for Jacek will be acting as a miniature vertical slice of the main campaign. It will serve as a great exercise before we handle the big main single player plot. Okay, that's it for today. I want to thank all early access players for supporting Hellish Quart and taking part in its development. It is because of your support the game can be bigger than we initially planned. Thank you for your patience with the time we take to invent new mechanics. We hope this approach will be worth it in the end. Everyone who wants to follow the development progress are welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. Bye!